The quietest goodbye is often the most painful one. Breaking an empath is not like hurting a person who reacts fast, shouts loudly, and shows every wound on the surface. With an empath, the damage often happens behind calm eyes. They may still smile, they may still answer with kindness, they may still act normal in front of everyone, but deep inside, a door has already closed. The person who once cared too much, felt too much, and tried too hard is no longer standing in the same place emotionally. And that is where the real consequence begins. Many people do not understand this until it is too late. They think an empath's patience means weakness. They think forgiveness means permission. They think silence means the pain was small. But an empath does not stay patient because they are blind. They stay patient because they are hoping the person they love will finally understand. They give chances because they can feel pain in others. They explain because they believe honesty can repair damage. They forgive because their heart keeps looking for the good. But when that same heart is ignored, used, blamed, and broken again and again, a deep shift begins. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not revenge, it is emotional detachment. And once an empath reaches that point, the connection never feels the same again. In this video, we will talk about what really happens when someone breaks an empath. We will explain why their silence becomes so powerful, why their distance feels brutal, and why the person who hurt them often realizes the truth when the empath has already stopped caring in the same way. You will learn why an empath may stop explaining their pain, why they suddenly see patterns they ignored for years, and why their calmness can feel colder than anger. You will also understand a lesser-known truth about deep empathy. People with strong emotional sensitivity often carry pain for a long time before they walk away. They do not leave at the first mistake. They leave after their mind accepts what their heart kept denying. And when that happens, the loss is not only emotional. The person who broke them loses comfort, loyalty, warmth, attention, forgiveness, and the rare feeling of being understood without judgment. That is why this topic matters, because breaking an empath does not create a monster. It creates a person who finally protects their peace. Watch this video until the end because the final consequence is the one most people never expect. It is not that the empath becomes cruel. It is that they become unreachable. And once they take their energy back, the silence they leave behind can feel heavier than any argument. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy calm, deep, and powerful videos about empaths, emotional strength, boundaries, and human behavior, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the end. The first brutal consequence of breaking an empath is not an argument. It is not revenge. It is not a loud emotional explosion. It is silence. And this silence is very different from normal silence. It is not the silence of a person who does not know what to say. It is the silence of a person who has already said too much and was not heard. Before an empath reaches this point, they usually try to explain everything. They explain the small things. They explain the big things. They explain the pain behind their reaction. They explain why a certain word hurt them. They explain why a repeated action made them feel unsafe. They explain why respect matters. They explain why honesty matters. They explain why being ignored feels painful. They explain why emotional care should not be begged for. And every time they explain, they are not trying to create drama. They are trying to save the connection. They believe that if the other person truly understands the pain, maybe the damage will stop. They believe one honest conversation can open the door to change. They believe that love, friendship, or loyalty can still be repaired if both people are willing to see the truth. This is why an empath may repeat the same feeling many times. They are not doing it because they enjoy suffering. They are doing it because they still have hope. They still believe the person in front of them has a heart that can listen. But after too many moments of being dismissed, blamed, mocked, misunderstood, or made to feel too sensitive, the empath begins to lose the desire to explain. At first, they may still try. Their voice may become softer. Their words may become shorter. Their eyes may carry more pain than their mouth can express. But deep inside, a painful truth begins to form. They start to realize that the issue was never that they did not explain clearly enough. The issue was that the other person did not want to understand in the first place. That realization breaks a different part of them. Because an empath can handle a mistake, they can handle a difficult conversation, they can handle emotional honesty. But what hurts them deeply is when someone keeps hurting them and then acts confused about the pain. What breaks them is when they offer their heart in words and the other person turns those words into an argument. What drains them is when they share their pain and the other person makes them feel guilty for having pain at all. So slowly the empath stops explaining. They stop writing long messages. They stop asking why. They stop defending their feelings. They stop trying to prove that their pain is real. They stop looking for the perfect sentence that will finally make the other person care. This silence is not weakness, it is emotional withdrawal. It is the nervous system saying enough. It is the heart saying, I cannot keep bleeding in front of someone who keeps calling it a problem. It is the mind saying, I have given every chance, every explanation, every soft warning, and still nothing changed. This is why the silence of an empath can feel so brutal to the person who hurt them. Because for a long time, that person may have been used to the empath speaking, explaining, caring, checking in, and trying again. They may have taken that emotional effort as normal. They may have thought the empath would always return to explain one more time. But when the empath becomes silent, the whole emotional balance changes. The person who used to receive endless understanding now receives distance. The person who used to be comforted now faces emptiness. The person who used to be forgiven quickly now stands in front of a closed door. And the hardest part is that the empath may not even look angry. They may still behave with basic respect. They may still answer simple questions. They may still move through life calmly. But the warmth is gone, the openness is gone, the soft emotional access is gone. Their silence is not a game. It is not a trick to get attention. It is not a punishment. It is the final sign that they have stopped hoping the other person will care. When an empath stops explaining, it usually means they have stopped believing that their pain matters to that person. And this is where the pain becomes quiet but deep, because an empath does not usually want to give up on people. They often hold on longer than they should. They look for reasons, they study tones, moods, actions, and patterns. They try to understand why someone is cold, why someone is distant, why someone is cruel, why someone keeps making promises and breaking them. They may even blame themselves at first. They may think they asked for too much. They may think they were too emotional. They may think their expectations were too high. They may think they should have been more patient, more calm, more understanding. This is one of the hidden burdens of deep empathy. An empath can understand another person's pain so deeply that they excuse behavior that is slowly damaging them. They can sense wounds in others, so they give chances to people who keep using those chances as permission. They can feel the sadness behind someone's anger, so they tolerate words that cut them. They can notice the fear behind someone's distance, so they keep reaching out even when their own heart is being neglected. But pain has a way of removing illusion. At first, the empath sees the good. They remember the kind moments. They remember the smile. They remember the early care. They remember the soft apology. They remember who that person seemed to be before the pattern became clear. They hold on to the version of the person they first believed in. This is why it can take an empath a long time to accept reality. They do not only see what a person does, they also see what a person could become. They see potential. They see fear. They see childhood wounds. They see stress. They see excuses that almost sound reasonable. They see the pain under the behavior. And because they see so much, they often delay the truth. But when someone breaks them deeply enough, their emotional vision changes. The same heart that once searched for reasons begins to search for patterns. The same mind that once asked, "Why did they do this?" begins to ask, "Why did I keep allowing this?" That question is painful because it turns the empath inward. It does not mean they blame themselves for being hurt. It means they finally begin to understand their own role in staying too long, forgiving too fast, and explaining too much. This is a hard moment, but it is also a powerful one. Because once an empath starts seeing patterns, the mask no longer works. Sweet words do not erase repeated harm. A soft apology does not remove a long history of disrespect. One kind message does not cancel months or years of emotional neglect. A sudden act of care does not hide a cycle of control, guilt, or manipulation. The empath begins to connect all the moments they once separated. That time they felt small. That time they were made to doubt their memory. That time they apologized just to keep peace. That time they accepted less because they were afraid of losing the connection. That time they stayed silent because speaking always became a fight. These moments begin to form a clear picture, and once that picture appears, the empath cannot go back to seeing only the good. This is brutal for the person who hurt them because the empath no longer believes the mask. Before, the empath may have focused on the pain behind the person's behavior. After the breaking point, they focus on the behavior itself. They stop giving endless meaning to every excuse. They stop explaining away the disrespect. They stop turning someone's emotional immaturity into their own responsibility. They stop treating every wound in the other person as a reason to accept being wounded themselves. This is the moment when their softness becomes sharp in a quiet way. Not cruel, not hateful, just clear. And clarity is dangerous to anyone who benefited from confusion. When an empath is confused, they can be pulled back. When they are hoping, they can be convinced. When they are blaming themselves, they can be controlled. But when they see clearly, manipulation loses its power, guilt becomes easier to recognize, empty apologies become easier to spot, mixed signals no longer feel mysterious, they feel disrespectful, emotional distance no longer feels like a challenge to win, it feels like a warning to leave. The empath begins to trust what they feel, but they also begin to trust what they see. They understand that love without respect is not safety. They understand that words without changed behavior are not healing. They understand that being needed is not the same as being valued. This truth can hurt more than the original wound because it forces the empath to let go of the story they built in their mind. They have to release the version of the person they were hoping for. They have to accept that some people enjoy the comfort of an empath but do not want the responsibility of loving one properly. They have to accept that some people want access to their warmth but not accountability for their actions. They have to accept that some people only respect boundaries after they lose the benefits of having none. And once the empath accepts this, they do not unsee it. The empath's heart may be soft, but once their eyes open, they do not unsee the truth. This is where the third consequence begins, and it is one of the most painful. They remove emotional access. Many people do not realize how much they were receiving from an empath until it is gone. They do not notice the daily comfort, because the empath gives it so naturally. They do not notice the patience because the empath has been patient for so long. They do not notice the forgiveness because forgiveness became expected. They do not notice the emotional safety because the empath kept making room for them. They do not notice the soft way the empath listened, the way they remembered details, the way they checked in, the way they noticed changes in mood, the way they tried to make heavy moments feel lighter. They do not notice how often the empath carried the emotional weight of the connection. They do not notice the mental energy the empath spent trying to understand them, protect them, comfort them, and keep the relationship from falling apart. But when the empath finally removes that energy, the absence becomes impossible to ignore. The person who once felt understood now feels exposed. The person who once felt forgiven now feels the weight of their actions. The person who once had a safe place to return to now finds that the door is no longer open in the same way. This is not because the empath suddenly hates them. Hate still requires a strong emotional connection. The empath may not have enough emotional energy left for hate. What they feel is often deeper than anger. They feel done. They feel tired. They feel clear. They feel protective of themselves. That is why their distance can feel so final. They may still be kind, but they are no longer available. They may still speak, but they no longer reveal the tender parts of themselves. They may still listen, but not with the same emotional investment. They may still care in a human way, but they no longer carry the other person's pain as their own. This shift can confuse the person who broke them. They may think, why are they acting different? Why are they not reacting? Why are they not asking questions? Why are they not trying to fix this? But the answer is simple. The empath has stopped feeling responsible for healing a person who kept hurting them. This is one of the most important parts of the transformation. Before the breaking point, the empath may feel responsible for everyone's feelings. If someone is upset, they try to calm them. If someone is distant, they try to understand them. If someone is angry, they try to make peace. If someone is broken, they try to help. But when they are hurt deeply enough, they begin to see the danger in carrying people who keep dropping them. They realize that love is not supposed to require self-abandonment. They realize that compassion is not supposed to become a cage. They realize that caring for someone does not mean allowing that person to keep damaging their spirit. So they begin to pull their energy back. This may happen slowly. First, they stop sharing personal details, then they stop asking deep questions, Then they stop offering emotional support before it is requested. Then they stop staying awake thinking about how to fix the situation. Then they stop feeling guilty for choosing peace. Each step may look small from the outside, but inside the empath, it is a major act of survival. They are rebuilding boundaries where there used to be open doors. They are learning to pause before giving. They are learning to ask whether a person deserves access to their inner world. They are learning that not everyone who wants their comfort deserves their trust. And this is why losing an empath's emotional access can feel brutal, because the empath's love is not shallow. Their presence is not empty. Their care is not casual. When they are fully present, they make people feel deeply seen. They notice what others miss. They hear what is not said. They sense when a person is pretending to be fine. They offer a kind of emotional attention that many people search for their whole lives. So when that attention disappears, the loss feels large. The other person may finally understand that they were not just losing a person, they were losing a source of warmth, patience, loyalty, and emotional shelter. But the empath is no longer willing to be a shelter for someone who keeps bringing storms. The brutal consequence is not that the empath hates you, it is that they no longer feel responsible for healing you. And once that responsibility is gone, the relationship changes at the root. The person who hurt them can no longer count on old reactions. They can no longer use sadness to pull the empath back. They can no longer use guilt to open the same door. They can no longer use confusion to keep the empath explaining. They can no longer use silence to make the empath chase. The empath has already lived through the fear of losing them, and once that fear has been survived, it no longer controls the empath in the same way. This creates the fourth consequence, and it can feel colder than all the others. They become calm in a way that feels cold. This calmness is often misunderstood. People may think the empath no longer cares at all. They may think the empath became heartless. They may think the empath changed suddenly. But this calmness was not sudden. It was built through many nights of overthinking, many quiet tears, many ignored conversations, many moments of disappointment, and many times when the empath had to comfort themselves after being hurt by the person they were trying to love. When an empath is still emotionally invested, they often react. They may cry because they still want to be understood. They may explain because they still want repair. They may ask questions because they still want honesty. They may feel anxious because the connection still matters deeply. They may replay conversations because they are still searching for the place where things went wrong. Their emotions are not signs of weakness, they are signs of investment. They still care enough to feel disturbed. They still care enough to try. They still care enough to be affected. But after the breaking point, that emotional storm begins to settle, not because the pain was small, but because the empath finally stops handing their nervous system to someone unsafe. They stop letting another person's mood decide their peace. They stop letting mixed signals control their mind. They stop letting silence create panic. They stop letting guilt pull them back into the same cycle. Their calmness becomes a boundary. Their quiet becomes protection. Their stillness becomes strength. This can feel very uncomfortable to the person who was used to triggering them. A person who once had power over the empath through confusion may suddenly feel powerless. The old methods do not work anymore. If they withdraw, the empath does not chase. If they send a small message, the empath does not rush with full emotional energy. If they act hurt, the empath does not abandon themselves to fix it. If they use guilt, the empath recognizes it. If they offer a shallow apology, the empath hears what is missing. If they try to reopen the connection without accountability, the empath keeps the door guarded. This calmness feels cold because it is no longer built around pleasing the other person. It is built around self-respect. And for someone who benefited from the empath's lack of boundaries, self-respect can look like cruelty, but it is not cruelty, it is healing. It is the empath choosing not to bleed every time someone reaches for a wound. It is the empath refusing to turn every disrespectful act into a lesson in patience. It is the empath understanding that being kind does not mean being available to everyone. This calmness is also powerful because it shows that the empath has stopped chasing closure. Many empaths spend a long time searching for closure from the person who hurt them. They want the person to admit the truth. They want a real apology. They want the other person to understand the damage. They want the pain to make sense. But after enough disappointment, they realize that some people will never give honest closure because honest closure would require them to face themselves. So the empath stops waiting for it. They create closure from their own clarity. They stop needing the other person to validate the pain. They know what happened, they know how it felt, they know what it cost them, and that is enough. This is one of the strongest moments in an empath's emotional growth. When they no longer need the person who hurt them to agree that they were hurt, they become free. Their peace no longer depends on another person's honesty. Their healing no longer waits for another person's apology. Their strength no longer needs permission. And that freedom can feel brutal to anyone who expected the empath to stay emotionally tied to them forever. A broken empath does not always become bitter. Sometimes they become peaceful, and that peace is impossible to control. This does not mean the empath feels no pain. It means they have stopped letting pain make decisions for them. It means they can feel sadness without running back. It means they can remember good moments without ignoring bad patterns. It means they can miss someone without reopening the door. It means they can care from a distance without sacrificing themselves again. This is emotional maturity, but it is born from deep hurt. The empath had to learn it the hard way. They had to learn that not every bond is worth saving. They had to learn that not every person who says sorry is ready to change. They had to learn that some people want forgiveness without transformation. They had to learn that some people only fear losing access, not causing pain. They had to learn that their heart is valuable and not everyone should be allowed near it. As this calmness grows, the empath becomes more careful with their energy. They no longer tell everyone what hurts them. They no longer trust fast. They no longer explain every boundary. They no longer confuse intensity with love. They no longer confuse being needed with being respected. They no longer confuse chemistry with safety. They no longer think compassion means staying where they are being drained. This new version of them may look quiet, but inside it is strong. It is the version that survived emotional confusion and chose clarity. It is the version that stopped asking for basic care from people who treated care like a favor. It is the version that learned to protect the softness without destroying it. And that is important because the goal is not for the empath to become hard in a cruel way. The goal is for them to become wise. A wise empath can still love deeply, but they no longer love blindly. They can still forgive, but they no longer use forgiveness to erase patterns. They can still understand pain in others, but they no longer let that understanding excuse harmful behavior. They can still be kind, but they no longer give unlimited access to people who have not earned trust. This is the real transformation that happens after an empath is broken. Their silence teaches them where their voice was wasted. Their clarity teaches them where their hope was misplaced. Their distance teaches them where their energy was being used. Their calmness teaches them that peace is more valuable than being chosen by someone who keeps choosing to hurt them. And as this transformation continues, the person who broke them may finally begin to feel the weight of what changed. They may notice that the empath no longer reacts the same way. They may notice that the old emotional closeness is gone. They may notice that apologies no longer open the same doors. They may notice that the empath's smile is polite but not warm. They may notice that conversations stay on the surface. They may notice that the person who once fought for the connection is now simply allowing distance to exist. That is when the brutal truth becomes clear. The empath did not leave only because of one mistake. They left because the same pain was repeated until love had nowhere safe to stay. They did not stop explaining because they had no words. They stopped explaining because the words had been wasted. They did not see the truth because they wanted to judge. They saw the truth because pain finally removed the illusion. They did not remove emotional access because they were cruel. They removed it because they could no longer survive being open to someone unsafe. They did not become calm because they stopped feeling. They became calm because they finally stopped giving their feelings to someone who kept misusing them. And this is why breaking an empath has consequences that many people do not understand until the damage is permanent. The empath may not destroy your life, they may not expose you, they may not chase revenge, they may not scream, they may not fight to be understood anymore, but they will take back the one thing that made the connection feel alive: their energy, their care, their emotional presence, their endless willingness to understand, their habit of making room for your pain while hiding their own. And once that is gone, the relationship becomes a very different place. It becomes quieter, colder, more distant, more honest. Because the truth is finally standing there without the empath covering it with hope. This is the part many people fail to see. The empath was not weak when they stayed. They were loving, they were patient, they were trying to believe in repair. But when they finally stop, that stopping is powerful. It is the end of begging to be respected. It is the end of explaining pain to someone who benefits from not understanding it. It is the end of carrying emotional weight that was never theirs alone to carry. It is the beginning of a new boundary, a new clarity, a new peace, and that peace may feel brutal to the person who broke them because it proves that the empath can survive without the connection they once fought so hard to protect. Breaking an empath has brutal consequences, but not because they become cruel, not because they become dangerous, not because they start planning revenge in silence. The real consequence is much deeper than that. When an empath is broken too many times, they stop being available to people who only loved their softness when it was useful. They stop giving unlimited patience to those who never respected their pain. They stop explaining themselves to people who only listened when it benefited them. And they stop opening their heart to those who kept treating that heart like it could never close. This is what makes the ending so powerful. The empath does not always leave with anger. Sometimes they leave with peace. Sometimes they leave with a calm face, a quiet heart, and a soul that finally understands its own value. They no longer beg to be chosen. They no longer ask someone to see their worth. They no longer carry the guilt of walking away from people who never cared about how much pain they caused. And that is when the person who broke them finally feels the loss. They realize the empath was not weak. They were loyal. They were not too sensitive. They were deeply aware. They were not asking for too much. They were asking the wrong person. An empath's silence is not empty. It is full of lessons, full of pain, full of truth, full of every moment they tried, every tear they hid, every chance they gave, and every time they hoped things would change. But once they choose peace over attachment, everything becomes different. They may forgive, but they do not return the same. They may care, but they do not carry the same weight. They may remember, but they no longer live inside the wound. So if this message touched something inside you, comment below and tell us if you have ever reached the point where you stopped explaining and simply walked away. Like this video if it gave you clarity. Subscribe to the channel for more calm, deep, and powerful videos about empaths, emotional strength, boundaries, and human behavior. And share this video with someone who gives too much to people who give too little. Because sometimes, the person who keeps giving needs to hear that walking away is not weakness. It is self-respect. And remember this final truth. The most brutal consequence of breaking an empath is not their revenge, it is their absence.